Okay, so I'm sure you read the title, and my short answer is no, I don't think Bernie Sanders is a socialist. But if you want to hear why, please stick around. Before we start, though, a couple disclaimers. First of all, I like Bernie, and this is not meant to be like an attack against him or anything. I do plan to make a video detailing whether I think Bernie is good for the left next, so stay tuned for that. And second, for my more like-minded Marxist-Leninist friends, this is also not me praising democratic socialism or reformism. Also, I referenced some stuff in this video, and I will have it all in the description. Now, let's get started. The American left is actually really complicated right now. Since the anti war wave of the 1960s, which I would love to talk about at some point, by the way, the left had been on a pretty steady decline, overshadowed by neoliberal and neoconservative figures like Bill and Hillary Clinton, Bush 1 and 2, Obama, etc. In fact, excepting a couple small surges during the invasion of Iraq and the Great Recession with the Occupy movement, the left was basically vacant for decades. And then suddenly, a quote unquote fringe senator from Vermont was thrust into the spotlight when he announced his candidacy for President of the United States in 2016 against the then heir to the throne, Hillary Rodham Clinton, who I would also love to talk about at some point, maybe if she's ever relevant again. Okay, so if you don't live in the US or if you just haven't been paying attention for these past 4 years or so, here's some background on Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is a 77-year-old senator from Vermont who is currently running for the 2020 Democratic nomination for president. He's been in the Senate for about 12 years beginning in 2007, and before that he was representative for the single district of Vermont for 16 years from 1991 to 2007. He also served as the mayor of Burlington, Vermont prior to his national level political career. Now, Bernie Sanders calls himself, and this brought the term back into the spotlight after decades of silence, a democratic socialist. And whether this is appropriate is a tough question that I hope to answer today. So let's start with what Bernie actually believes. Well, the one actually anti capitalist thing that I could find, and I'm being generous with my use of anti capitalist here, is his activity within the Liberty Union Party, which is a self described nonviolent socialist party. After reading into their current platform, and to be fair, it may be different from the 1970s, I can conclude that they are a bit more radical than the mainstream, including Sanders himself in the modern day. They say in their platform, for example, that, quote, everyone is entitled to a fair rate of return for their labor, and, quote, that rate of return should be the same for everyone, end quote. And again, I'm being charitable with my interpretation of those words, but I would say they're generally to the left of the norm in the United States today. See the link to their platform in the description, by the way. Now, all that being said, Bernie has not been active in this party since the late 1970s. To assume that he still has anti-capitalist tendencies that he's like currently masking is a pretty big stretch and, to be honest, irrelevant if he's not bold enough to voice them. Speaking of the present, let's talk about Sanders' platform today. As a candidate, Bernie has some pretty bold proposals, all part of his, quote, democratic socialism, mind you. Here's a list, and I didn't go over them all, and I'm not going to go too far in detail, by the way, but nonetheless, here we go. So you have Medicare for All, which is a system that would create a single government-sponsored medical insurance free of co-pays, deductibles, and premiums, which would replace the current private model. You have the Green New Deal, which is a massive $16 trillion program that aims to reach, quote, 100% renewable energy for electricity and transportation by no later than 2030 and complete decarbonization by 2050 at the latest, end quote. You have a $15 an hour minimum wage, a federal job guarantee, a workplace democracy plan, which is a sweeping union rights bill that would give dozens of protections to union workers with the aim of increasing union membership and wages. You also have tuition free university, which is a bill that would totally eradicate tuition costs for students at public universities. And you have the elimination of student debt, a total forgiveness of over $1 trillion of debt students and former students have incurred. So those are the major ones. I wish I could go into detail about each one, and maybe I will in separate videos, but the point of this video is to talk about whether Bernie's platform is actually socialist. Now, one more relevant detail, the definition of democratic socialism. Well, there isn't one agreed upon definition, so I'll give two credible sources. So first, you have the Democratic Socialists of America's website under the heading What is Democratic Socialism, which says the following, quote, Democratic Socialists believe that both the economy and society should be run democratically to meet public needs, not to make profits for the few, end quote. They also say, quote, Democratic Socialists do not want to create an all-powerful government bureaucracy, but we do not want big corporate bureaucracies to control our society either. Rather, we believe that social and economic decisions should be made by those whom they most affect." End quote. Again, source in the description. And the next source is author Donald F. Busky, who's written a lot about leftist ideology. And he says the following in his book, Democratic Socialism, A Global Survey, quote, "Democratic socialism is the wing of the socialist movement that combines a belief in a socially owned economy with that of political democracy. And although I hate using dictionaries to define ideology, there are two relevant definitions provided by Merriam-Webster on democratic socialism. So first, the definition of democratic socialism, which is, quote, "a political movement advocating a gradual and peaceful transition from capitalism to socialism by democratic means." And the second definition is just socialism, which is, quote, "any of various economic and political theories advocating collective or governmental ownership and administration of the means of production and distribution of goods." End quote. So now that all that is over with, this is what I think we can conclude about democratic socialism in its purest sense. It is a post-capitalist, meaning anti-capitalist ideology that seeks to peacefully create an economy where economic decisions are made democratically, either through common ownership of the tools used in making goods or through government intervention in a democratic model. This is, in my humble opinion, a socialist ideology, even if I think it's a bit unrealistic. However, the question is, does Bernie actually embody this ideology? Well, no, I don't think he does, at least not openly. And I have a sort of long list of reasons why, and they're very quote heavy, and I'm sorry for that. So in 2015, Bernie gave a speech where he spoke about what democratic socialism means to him. Here's a quote. Quote, "My view of democratic socialism builds on the success of many other countries around the world who have done a far better job than we have in protecting the needs of their working families, their elderly citizens, their children, their sick, and their poor." So which countries is Bernie talking about? Well, there's another quote from one of the Democratic debates in 2016, quote, "I think we should look to countries like Denmark, like Sweden and Norway, and learn what they have accomplished for their working people." End quote. And one more quote, sorry, last one. This one is from a more recent time, from June of this year, 2019, in a speech about democratic socialism. Quote, "Economic rights are human rights, and that is what I mean when I say democratic socialism." End quote. Now, notice that in all of these quotes, and please tell me if I missed one that says otherwise, Bernie never mentions collective ownership of the economy. Moreover, when asked what he wants to model his system after, he says that we should become more like the Scandinavian countries, namely Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. And are those countries socialists? Not at all. They basically embody what Bernie wants, so at least he's being honest, but I don't want to spend much time going into detail about them. But they basically have a model called a welfare state, which means they have tax-funded programs that act as social safety nets, which are programs that help with economic burdens like education, healthcare, and unemployment for their citizens. This is also called social democracy. So to sum up, Bernie Sanders, though he has done a lot in the way of changing the political landscape in the United States, and I would argue it's a good change, is not a socialist. He much more closely follows the models of Scandinavia and social democracy. So that's all I have for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to stay tuned for my analysis and opinion of Bernie's effect on the left in the coming weeks. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.